Hi, this is Uwade, and this is the LSQ podcast.
Hey, I'm Jenny LSQ. Thanks for pressing play on episode 122 of the LSQ podcast, in which I talk with the up-and-coming singer-songwriter Uwade, whose beautiful debut studio album, oh, it's so good, Florilegium, arrived this spring, following truly years of anticipation from anyone like me who was first captivated by her voice when we heard her sing on Fleet Fox's 2020 album, Sure. As you'll hear, Uwade's musical influences since childhood span an array of genres: R&B, gospel, pop, hip-hop, choir music, indie rock, and more. So it's no wonder that her own songs are so refreshingly genre-agnostic. Uwade is also currently studying for her PhD in classics, and I was fascinated to hear her talk about how her academic and musical pursuits feed each other. Alright, here we go. Where are you right now with your in the blurry room?
Listen, I don't know if I can unblur it. It's just a mess right now. I'm in my dorm room on campus in California. If it didn't look as crazy as it did, I would let you see the clothes on the floor, but that feels uncouth. So,
Wow, dorm room. That is the realness right there.
yeah,
Dorm life.
yeah, yeah.
Can I ask, are you comfortable with saying what higher learning institution you're at currently?
Yes, I'm at Stanford University.
I mean, that's one of the aspects of your life that I find really interesting is that you are doing music as seriously as you are and doing academics as seriously as you are simultaneously. And well, I don't want to get ahead of myself because there are so many things I want to talk about, but the dorm room, invocation of the dorm room brought me there. Let me pause for a minute to say, welcome to the LSQ podcast, Uwade. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
So I want to talk about your album and if Florilegium, is that the correct way to pronounce that?
I say Florilegium, but more and more people have been saying Florilegium that I'm like, maybe I should change the way I pronounce it because I think it probably makes more sense. But I say Florilegium if that helps.
Florilegium. Listen, I think you know how to pronounce the title of your album. I'm going to go with your pronunciation of it. But congratulations on making such a beautiful album and your debut full length.
Thank you so much. It's been a long time coming.
I first was made aware of you as an artist via Robin Pecknold of Fleet Foxes. And of course, you contributed to their album Shore from 2020. And Robin was on this podcast. And I remember him talking about just how much he loved working with you. Tell me a little about how did that happen in the first place?
Yeah, it's one of those wild, like, social media Cinderella stories. I was in college and I decided to make my sort of music Instagram account after just kind of dabbling for a long time in various creative arts. And I would just post covers of songs by artists that I loved and the songs that I loved. And I happened to post a cover when I was in Greece studying abroad, and we went on an excursion, and I could sort of see the island of Mykonos, and I was like, "Oh, I know a song about that place." So we went back to our apartment, and I recorded the cover. And a friend that I had made through social media had worked with Robin on a bit of crack up, and he sent it to him. He sent the cover to him. And Robin commented, and that alone was like, oh, well, my work here is done. I've achieved all that I could hope to as an artist. This is amazing. But then he asked me if I wanted to, if I do singing work. And at that point, I'd never done anything. But I was like, I'll do anything. So he was like, could you sing, come and record a bit for this record? And it just happened to work out that I wasn't too far from where he was recording. And so I went to the studio for a day, and it was just 8 hours of madness, but also deep peace because he's a very peaceful person. But in my head, I was like, this is beyond, beyond.
I mean, were you at that point thinking that you were on a path toward doing music as a major pursuit, or or were you mostly on the academic track at that point?
Yeah, I was mostly on the academic track. When I was maybe 5 years old, I wanted to be a singer. And then sort of through the changes of life, I kind of narrowed things into like thinking of academia. And my dad one day was like, oh, yeah, no child of mine will ever be a musician. And I was like, okay, well, I can, but I guess it's not, my primary focus. So at that point, no, I hadn't thought about it, but it opened the door. Mm.
Let's go back to 5-year-old you.
Mm.
So you're 5. Where are you?
I'm 5. I'm in North Carolina, Charlotte. Moved to the US 3 years prior when I was 2 or so, and just starting kindergarten, much to the chagrin of my parents, because when in Nigeria you start at like 3. So they're like, what are we going to do with her for all these years? So,
Do something with your life, three
yeah.
and a half year old.
Yeah, exactly.
And what, I mean, obviously you're 5 and it's a hazy memory, but what do you remember about the creative urge, that rose within you that made you start to sing or feel like drawn to it in that really innocent way?
Yeah, I think I've always just been a bit of a ham. Like I think, my mom tells me the story. I don't exactly remember it, but on the flight here from Nigeria to New York, she said that like I put on my bathing suit and I was walking up and down the aisle and like talking to people and I was just very gregarious. And I think, so I guess from a young age, I've always liked performing, but I don't remember my earliest real memory of singing is more like elementary school. So I don't know what made me want to do it when I was 5, but I think I did. There was a part of me that wanted to perform for sure.
And so then when you got to elementary school, what brought it out of you then, this desire to be creative? And what kinds of music or, musical things would you have been enjoying that you would have related to at that point?
Yeah, it was mainly choir classes, and just singing together. I don't remember the exact moment, but I do remember in fourth grade there being a moment where I was like, oh, I think I can hold a tune. Like I'm hearing what's coming out and I don't know how, but it sounds okay. And then I would every now and then get like a solo for a performance. And usually I went to Catholic school, so it was like sort of some sort of chant or some sort of like polyphonic thing. And so at the Stations of the Cross, we sang this song at the cross for station keeping and like did a little bit of Latin with it. And so that was where that was the kind of music I started singing, actually. Yeah.
And when did you start getting into just like the popular music of the day, like as a kid in North Carolina? Like what was the shit that you were like starting to identify with as being your music and your vibe?
Yeah, I would say probably around middle school. I was exposed to the internet a little too early, I think, and I had like unrestricted access because I don't think my parents knew what was going on. So just like, I don't know, I would listen to the radio. This one station in Charlotte was 97.9, Power 98, and they played a lot of like rap and hip hop and R&B. And my mom at the time would do a lot of radio sort of shows with them at her hair braiding shop. And so I was just listening to lots of Beyonce, lots of Rihanna, lots of, Mario. My mom had this record of Aaliyah, and I would play, it was a CD. I would play it in the car, this gospel album by Yolanda Adams. I really dived into when I was younger. So I would say, yeah, a lot of R&B. I didn't really listen to much other than pop music on the radio, much like rock or indie until high school, I would say.
And what ushered that in? Was it sort of a peer group that started to introduce you to stuff?
It was also the internet. It was this website called 8 Tracks where I found these like playlists that people would put together. And there's also another website called Hilly Dilly because at the time I really wanted to like I was concerned with refining my taste. Like I was like, I don't want to just listen to what the masses listen to. What can I find that's deep and special? So I would like listen to things sort of curated by music reviewers, which actually happened to be a lot of Drake at the time, which is interesting now that I look back on it. But I was like, this is refined. This is hip hop.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that time when Drake and like The Weeknd and stuff were
Yeah.
alt sort of.
Yeah, exactly. It was really interesting. But it was cool. I learned a lot of cool artists. But I remember one playlist in particular on 8 Tracks that had Vampire Weekend on it and The Strokes. And I just like listened to it over and over again. And I didn't really come back to The Strokes until a bit later, but like that and Phoenix and Franz Ferdinand, like those sort of and then like the Sylvan Essos and like that world was just opened up to me, and I was like, this beautiful. Chef's kiss.
Did you start to like nerd out on it pretty hard and like just, feel kind of that that was part of your identity was that you were an indie person, you were a person who found cool music on the internet?
A little bit, but at the same time though, like I think it was sort of mid 2010s or like early 2010s, and like I think indie was kind of having a moment on the radio as well. Like I think of Mumford and Sons and the Lumineers, and it was sort of like the early makings of that style. So I felt like people, everyone, we were all sort of interested in like cultivating me and my friends a music taste, and finding interesting things. So I never got too far into like identifying fully because I also liked singing and listening to music with other people. So anything that could sort of make it a communal thing was fun. And if my friends weren't listening to an artist, I would enjoy it, but I wasn't like gonna, dive too deeply because I wanted to have that common experience. So
And what was the stuff that you would have been singing with other people at that point?
at that point, still chorus class,
Yeah. Yeah.
musicals, the Newsies. My chorus teacher at the time, love him. He was really into gospel, and so we did a lot of Whitney Houston, and it was great. It was great, but it wasn't like it was just sort of, you know, the generic. I wouldn't say generic, but it was sort of like these are the songs that you sing when you're in middle school choir, and I loved it.
Were you able to get out and see live music much at that point in life?
No, see, I don't think this is the Nigerian immigrant experience per se, but a large part of it is being a very good child who does things and, reads her books and doesn't go to sleepovers unless the person has slept over at your house before. It was just like and I'm an only child as well. So I didn't do that much live music viewing, but I actually did I went to a couple of shows. I went to see Ed Sheeran with some friends in middle school. I saw One Direction with my mom. We were in the nosebleeds, and she was just so fascinated by all of us children screaming at the top of our lungs for them. And I also went to this festival called the Weenie Roast where I got to see Weezer and like Fits in the Tantrums and like Wild Cut. It was wild. I didn't appreciate it at the moment because I didn't really know what I was seeing. But yeah, I did see some shows, but not super often.
So in that environment that you're describing where you are singing, it's obviously it's feeding you in some way,
Mhm.
right? I mean, well, let me just pause to ask that. Like, yeah, did it even though you weren't thinking you were doing that as like a thing you were going to become or do in a quote unquote serious way, or that the idea that that could be a thing you would do seriously maybe felt a little bit off limits, but did it feel important to you? Did you feel like in your body, in your spirit, like shit, this is something really important for me?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I would enter every talent show at my school and like really put a lot of effort into, finding the right song, and like if I was singing with people in choirs, it always my favorite class and always my favorite experience. And I sang a lot at church as well, which was another aspect of this sort of communal singing, but also solo singing. Yeah, it was just something I did all the time because I loved it and because it felt right, even if I wasn't sure that I wanted to or what it would mean to even get to do it professionally. But it was just like, this is part of me and it will always be.
Did you start thinking about like, could I, would, is there a way that I could do music as part of my adult life plan?
I honestly, like, I kind of tried some version of it but like I would just, make a garage band cover of something and like put it on my Gmail chat bio to like for all the people in my school. So I was like trying to, create and share. And that felt like an early moment of recognition that this is something that could happen, but I just did not have the concept of what it would even mean or how one even becomes a professional musician. I didn't really know any professional musicians. Most of my friends weren't interested in becoming professional musicians, so I was just like, I'll keep singing. I don't know what'll happen, but I'll keep singing.
And when did you start thinking about composing and writing your own songs?
I would say I wrote my first one maybe again in middle school, but not seriously until college. And I had a really good friend in an a cappella group who played guitar and started writing her own music, and we would bond over our music interests. And I'd listen to her compositions and her songs, and I was just like, this is, how are you doing this? Like, can you teach me how to do this? And she did.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, I owe so much to her. Heidi, love you, girl. She knows we're still friends, so it's not like she's a long lost inspiration, but she really kind of inspired me to start just by watching what she was doing.
Just by, right, making it, because it must, I mean, to me, I don't write songs. And even though I talk to artists and examine songs and ask constantly about how you did it, like it still seems magical to me.
Mhm.
And then the idea that someone, especially just a peer, could make it accessible and just break it down and just be like, all you've got to do is blank or whatever, is such a gift. I mean, do you remember anything about the spirit of what you learned, or what was the key that she gave you to understanding the sort of all you've got to do is blank?
I mean, mainly she would play her stuff for me, and then she would sort of encourage me to like, yeah, this was one of the main things. Go and experiment and find interesting chord progressions and let that be kind of the thing that leads you into coming up with melodies. And then I would just, you know, try things and run them by her. And we would just try things together and I would, try to figure out what it is I liked about what she did in a song. And we'd listen to songs that we liked together and try to understand what it is about this song that we liked. And so it was just a lot of experimentation that she encouraged that we did together as well.
And would that have been on guitar or piano or?
Mainly guitar, yeah.
Yeah. And did, once you had access to that, did it shape at all sort of the kind of artist that you were drawn to as a fan? Once you started to see, like, what kind of artist would I be if I do more of this?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I happened to just like, I think around that time, I happened to like and listen to artists that felt very, very different from me. Because, sometimes I feel like, in a lot of ways, quite a nerd, but also, not exactly. And there's nothing wrong with being a nerd. But I would listen to these artists that I thought were so cool. And because of that, I think because of the distance between what I felt I was and what I was inspired by, I think creative and magical things always happen because I couldn't imitate them. But in my attempt to, and like infusing all of myself into what I was doing, something cool was created, and that always felt great.
And so how did the shift happen? Because you, I mean, you were already doing music a little bit. It wasn't just the Fleet Foxes thing, right? I mean, you were already starting to record your own songs before you worked on shore with Fleet Foxes, right?
Yeah, I had one song out because after the experimentation with my friend, I started writing, trying to write things more seriously and like sort of produce things on my computer and perform the songs. And yeah, one day I was just like, I need to record this. And so it was already in progress, and I'm sure I would have continued to just like record singles if I could and then put them out and maybe do an EP, but Fleet Foxes just sort of like accelerated things, which was special.
Yeah, what was the main sort of benefit of that experience as far as helping to coalesce the beginning of figuring out who you are as an artist apart from that?
I think once that happened and I sort of saw, the inside of another studio and I saw the relationship between an engineer and a producer and an artist. And, as I was kind of starting to get attention from that, I was like, okay, I feel like I need to build infrastructure because this is something that I want to do. And I do want to continue to release songs and write music. And I see that that path is possible. And I see what it could look like. And so I, instead of saying, oh, no, 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 it was just like a one-off thing, I did, given the knowledge that I have had about, what recording looks like and what it means to create an album. It's like, I think I could do this. I want to go ahead and try.
Let's talk a little bit about how all of that overlaps or doesn't or whatever with all the academic stuff because I mean you've been doing academics pretty rigorously for your adulthood now at Oxford and Columbia and you're in a PhD program as you've said at Stanford. So what are you studying and yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I study classics, which is just a strange and antiquated word for the study of ancient Greece and Rome, and its languages, literature, philosophy, history, archaeology, all that good stuff. And I've been doing that since college, and I keep going back to school to many people's confusion and sometimes my own. But I don't know, I've always been really interested in like philosophy and more foundationally, more like the origin of things. And so originally I took Latin in high school because I heard it would help with understanding etymologies of words and the SATs. And once I saw that it did that, I was like, well, what else have they, you know, contributed to this crazy world that we live in? And I just kept learning more things. And I'm like, why is this way? And it's like, oh, because of this one Roman emperor who instituted this, and then the calendar, and then this, and the way we think of, and the days of the week. And I was like, this is great. These people, what did they do? Like, this is why, and why did they become so important? And so I just wanted to understand the world around me. And when things were a bit strange and felt messed up, I was like, why are they this way? So I was like, let me go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. And that was just my intuition. And I stayed there. It stayed interesting. My interests have shifted. And now I'm sort of more interested in thinking about how people of the African diaspora have interacted with this civilization and this culture, because so much of it was transmitted, because of colonialism. And to someone like my dad, who was, he grew up like reading Latin and was like sort of trained in classics in a way. And so just thinking about like, but he was also very anti-colonialist. So I was like, how are we balancing that relationship between the history of this field, but also the tension of like not exactly liking the way it was delivered. So all of those things are in the background for me.
I mean, well, the more you understand it and the more you come to learn about it, I would imagine it's phases of being like impressed that they invented the days of the week, but also I'm assuming a lot of problematic shit comes up
Yeah,
where you're just like, oh, so things are this way because it feels almost arbitrary, I would
yeah,
imagine. And so the power it exerts, the laying down of a template that people
exactly.
don't even bother to question because that's just what we think of as reality or
Yeah.
something, but it's like, well, there were things before that, and I'm curious if like the more you learn about it, like obviously you love it and you're really like engaged with it and interested in it, but it's like the more you learn about it, does it make you like love it more or hate it more or something?
I definitely have my struggles. And I think that's something I've like, yeah, I was just curious when I started, and I'm still curious, but now I'm sort of like, uh, like, they were great, but they were also really evil in so many ways. And it's just like you read some of these texts and like it's like, wow, here's the origin of xenophobia. That's great. Like I love that this is what, people are doing. And then it's just it's hard because I think in classics, like we're always having to think about how to justify the value of the discipline to the public. But unfortunately, so many of the people who are trying to do that are like actual white supremacists. So it's just like, oh, how do I take this away from you? But like at the same time, I don't know if I can because it's like sort of built into it's just I feel like I should continue because like, you can change things from the inside and people are working really hard to kind of reclaim these narratives and like untangle them, but it can be really discouraging when it's just like, wow, am I like telling people to learn about how to become a fascist? Like that's not really, I don't want to do that.
And what do you think? Yeah, I mean, is that just a path you're going to stay on? Like, or what do you think you'll, I mean, do with that? Feels like, you know what I mean? Feels like not the way I want to frame it, but yeah, what is that? Do you regard music and your career in music and your career in academics as being things that you intend to continue to do in tandem, devoting energy to both in these separate ways?
That's such a good question. And, that's why you're an icon, because that's the question I've been asking myself for the past 3 months. Yeah, I'm trying to kind of live the question because I don't know yet. I think music is one of those things that's always felt really uncertain, but so is academia. So it's sort of like which uncertainty makes more sense. But sometimes I just like to let life decide for me. Like if something really, amazing and major happens with music, then I will make my decision. But, this is I am it is kind of a job. I am getting, paid to work, paid to read. So as other people have other types of day jobs, in a way, this is kind of that for me. I would love to keep doing both in some capacity, but maybe not with the same intensity given to each. So that's to be determined.
Yeah, and I certainly don't mean to imply like that you would need to choose or ought to choose. I guess more I'm curious, like, let's just say you weren't also doing music, like what's your vision for
Right.
where you would where you want to take the academic stuff? Like, do you think you would be teaching at a college level or writing or something that I don't know what it is, but it's what
Yeah.
academic people do?
Yeah, that would be the goal. I think the goal is to sort of get to teach and write books about your interests and yeah, just sort of like give people the experience that I had at the very beginning when I was just like, oh my gosh, it's so cool to see all the traces of this civilization because that is a beautiful thing. Where you go with it is a different question. But yeah, I do think that would be the potential path.
Do you find that what you're studying has influenced the songs you're writing and the music that you're making in ways that you can articulate?
Definitely. I think I mean, I have just on the surface, I have a couple of songs that are kind of directly either pulled from something that I've read or are a result of like a thought experiment, but they're not on this record because I think most of this record was actually written when I was either out of school or sort of like between places and phases. So, I mean, apart from the title, which is very much like a little Easter egg, a very big one actually. I think I'm influenced by just being surrounded by literature as much as anyone else would be who likes to read poems and likes to read books and listen to people talking about things. I think in the same way, it's just like lots of really old people talking about things that still have an impact on my life and certain stories and like tropes and like, thinking about things like loss and abandonment and unrequited love. Like these are all still the things that I'm engaging with. So
Going into the studios that you worked in and actually recording these songs, did you have any specific ideas about sonically, texturally, like what you were hoping to hear? And the sort of part two of that question would be like, what were the main things you learned in this first time making a full length album and being able to zoom out and even look at those kinds of questions about like, oh, actually, now that I've done that, here's maybe how I will like to do it for the next thing.
yeah, I think going into it, I was very open because I felt like if I had a super clear sense of like this is exactly what I want it to sound like, given the constraints of like studio time and time to record, like I felt like I would inevitably be disappointed if I weren't just like I'm willing to see what happens. So that's kind of what I went into it with because I knew, you know, I don't have forever to do this. So I want to be happy in as much as I can be with what comes up. But what helped with that was sort of making sure I got a lot of the sounds that I wanted on my end of things with my demos, so that anything that we would kind of try or play with in the studio was felt like an addition and not like trying to just like restart everything from scratch. So yeah, I had some references for individual songs. I had some artists and some sounds that I really liked. But overall, I just felt like the only thing it needs to sound like is me. And I know what I want. Like, I know when I feel like things sound like me. And so that was nice and took a lot of pressure off.
I was reading where you said something about just kind of the concept of change and being influenced by the idea of change and its the ongoing nature of change as a part of life. I wonder, how do you think that you've most changed as an artist, during this phase of things and in the course of making this debut album?
I think I've, in some ways, become more confident, yeah, about sounds and about like what my sound is. I'm sort of confident in the fact that I don't feel like I need to define myself right now. So that's exciting, and I feel like that gives lots of avenues to travel and lots of potential. It's wild because, so much of life also happens as you're doing these things. So I'm like, have I changed as a person? Have I changed as an artist? But I would say confidence actually is one of the major things. Because in other experiences with recording, I haven't felt strong enough or sort of qualified enough to say that I want this like this and I don't want it like this. And I don't care if you don't like it. This is how I want it. But but while still being open to other people's input. But I think this time around, I tried not to let go of the fact that this will be something that has my name on it. And so I want to love it as much as hopefully everyone else will. So,
Yeah, that like following one's instincts thing it's challenging. I feel like when you're, especially the younger you are, it's like when
yeah.
you're just like, who am I to have instincts? And it's
No,
like, no, that's the base camp. Your instincts are the base camp. That's always there. It's like always the thing that is serving you, and like older folks can shut the fuck up. Kind of. It's just like there's only
yeah.
one you. There's only one, the base camp of instincts that are like informing everything you do. That's the reason that you're even in this situation in the first place.
Yeah. It's so hard to remember that. I think, yeah, I feel like age probably has to do with it because I don't know, I always feel like everyone else is smart because I know what I'm thinking, but I don't know what everyone else is thinking internally. But so I'm like, no, they must be thinking much better thoughts. So let me let me listen to their contributions.
And what does your songwriting practice look like at this point? Like, is it sort of like waiting for a feeling to arise that like, oh shit, something's happening, let me grab a guitar or whatever, or is it like okay, an hour every couple of days I sit down and I just wait?
Yeah, I think it depends on how much time I feel like I have, but generally, I think these days it's like, and I've noticed it more acutely that I feel something and I'm like, this has to come out like this. I've got to go. So that's really nice, and it's nice to remember that ultimately for me, songwriting has always been like trying to process my emotions because it feels very real. And even if what I create isn't amazing at that point, it's come from a true place of having something to say.
Well, I think that's all I got for you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was awesome to talk with you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, that does bring us to the end of episode 122. Thanks again to Uwade for connecting for that conversation. And you can keep up with her at uwade.com. And thank you so much for listening to the LSQ podcast. Find other episodes at jennylsq.com and on all the podcast platforms. You can reach me with questions and feedback and that kind of thing, either via email, lsqpod@gmail.com, or on socials on Blue Sky and Instagram specifically. I'm at JennyLSQ.